Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Art Coaching Club podcast. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most overlooked parts of running an art business, although I would argue it's pretty important, and we're going to get into why. But if you want to completely change how your work is perceived, let's talk about packaging. So I've received incredible and very underwhelming art packaging, and it has shaped my perception in some ways. What I would say is poor packaging or just not branded packaging a bad thing? If your art still gets there in one piece, which we're not having the shipping conversation, I'm not going to tell you how to package well today. That's a whole other conversation. But let's say it's packaged well, but it's not well branded. It's just like thrown in a recycled Amazon box or something. That's okay, but it's not memorable. When I receive something that is packaged so beautifully, every step of opening it is a work of art, I just remember it. And that can be really, really powerful because it really is the final touch point of that connection with your customer. And it really can be what gets them talking, what makes them remember you, what makes them want to buy from you again. So what we're going to talk about in this short solo session before we get into Tiffany's interview is just a few ideas that you can implement immediately at any budget when it comes to packaging. And if you subscribe to the Substack, I will go into this in a little more detail there, and also will, for all the paid subscribers, I get into a breakdown of budget by budget, how much you're willing to spend, different ideas of what you can do, including links to some of my favorite places to get different products made or different packaging materials made. So definitely recommend subscribing. It is $16 a month, or you get a really good deal, like almost half off. It's, I think, believe in $95 annually. So definitely consider that. There's so much good content I share in there week over week. But let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So first and foremost, why does packaging matter? Well, hear me out. Packaging matters because it's the final impression. As I mentioned before, it is a critical part of your brand story. It's the last touch point you have with your customer while they're in that buying process. So you think about, you first get to know them, let's say on Instagram, and then maybe you communicate in the DMs, maybe that moves to email, maybe that moves to your website, maybe you send them a couple of emails and then they purchase from you. And then that last touch point is the arrival of the artwork. And don't you want it to arrive and them feel overwhelmed with how much better it is even than they expected? And hopefully your artwork does that, but the packaging can really enhance that as well. And with that in mind, it really sets the tone for how people talk about your artwork and how they're going to share it with others. I know I've received some incredible packaging when it comes to clothing before, when it comes to art, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to different products. And frankly, it's just memorable. And it doesn't always have to be expensive. It's not the expensive touches that stick with me. It's more the thoughtfulness, which we'll get into. So it really impacts repeat purchases for that reason. It can impact referrals because people are, again, just remembering you. And it can also, impact perceived value. If it's packaged really beautifully, even if you're a brand new artist, people are going to feel like it was worthy of what I paid for this. Also, maybe you need to raise your prices so that your packaging, stands up to what your prices are as well. But I think it's really important to understand that great packaging doesn't need to be expensive. It needs to be intentional. And in this week's Substack, which will drop on Thursday, I do share a couple of photos of examples that all of you can look at of what I think makes great packaging. Everything from a company that had really beautiful presentation for something that I just ordered online, something that had this dress delivered and it came in the coolest box and it was the coolest unpackaging experience. Avenue 8's cocktails, which we're talking about later in this episode, had a fun branding experience as well, which we talk about with Tiffany, the founder, and then just some other cool, like aspirational, inspirational ideas to get you going. Because I think that contrasted with poor packaging experiences, which is just like plastic sleeves, generic mailers, things that get crumpled, bent, dirty. It just is such a different experience. But I want to conclude this little short solo session with a couple of affordable, high-impact packaging ideas that you can implement tomorrow. So first and foremost is the handwritten note. The handwritten note goes so far. I think in every phase of life, anytime you can have a handwritten note, you're going to do better. You're going to succeed. You're going to get the job. You're going to whatever it is. And so I think adding a handwritten note especially for commissions. Like, you have to do it for commissions, but even for all the little things, I write a handwritten note on everything I send out, and some of them are shorter and some of them are longer, and it depends on the piece and what I have to say about it, but I always include a handwritten note. And sometimes it's what I have on hand, sometimes it's branded stationery, sometimes I don't have that and it's just like a thank you card I have lying around, and sometimes it's just on the packing slip. But some level of handwritten note I think is a must-have, and it can be little to no cost. Second, branded tape or stickers, either in your color palette or with your branding on it, can go a really long way. If you're just doing a solid color that's in your color palette, that'll be cheaper. But tape and stickers, particularly stickers, are really affordable. You can get a roll of like 50 or 100 circle stickers for really, really cheap, and that can have your branding on it, and you can just stick that on a box or as kind of a finishing touch with some ribbon. Like, the ribbon doesn't even need to be branded for it to have a really beautiful look. I've also seen and received some gifts where this could go inside maybe a more structured box, but wrapping things with craft tape and then a little bit of twine and like a dried flower or like dried fruit. I've had people wrap things like that around the holidays, and I find it so beautiful. Obviously, if it's wrapped, it's probably gonna have to go in another box to be shipped, but I think something like that can be really beautiful and, again, really affordable. You're using like twine and craft paper. I also love a printed on like cardstock or a nice paper certificate of authenticity. Again, it just gives your artwork that luxurious feel. It makes people feel like they deserve this artwork. It's a luxury item, which it is. So why not make them feel that as they're opening it as well? I also love a QR code anywhere. You can have these printed on stickers. You could even just have it on like a little piece of paper, throw it in there, tape it on the back of the painting. And you can always have it linked to your website or something like that, but maybe think about selling to them without actually selling to them. And like, what if you had a QR code that went to a video of you creating the piece? Could be so cool. Or your favorite Spotify station that you always listen to in the studio, or that reminds you of this artwork, or maybe it's a blog post that's all about this artwork. I don't know. I don't know what format you use, but I think that little added touch could be really, really cool. So a couple just quick things to think about. You want to splurge on anything that really creates the moment. So, and when I say splurge, maybe it's time, not money, but like the custom note, a special insert, the QR code, like having that made, maybe upgraded paper. And the things that you don't need to spend as much money on, I personally think, and at least not right away, is like overly branded things. Like, you don't need branded ribbon. Like, you can have ribbon just in your color, or like a branded box. Again, you could just have a sticker on the outside of the box or tape with your branding. So I really recommend like figuring out what you can splurge versus save on. And I get, again, into the more details with all of this in the paid Substack. But I also encourage batching, bulk ordering, and I outline all of my favorite vendors where I've, really found deals. So definitely some things you can check out in that Substack. But I just want to round this out with why this has shifted my business. It's a higher perceived value. You're going to get more referrals. You're going to get more people talking. You're going to get more of that natural word of mouth, people sharing you in stories, people posting, unboxing, or just how happy they are, how excited they are. You can post it too because it's pretty as you're boxing it. So it's going to make people feel more connected to your brand outside of social media. I think in social media, we talk a lot about storytelling and maybe making people feel, connected to you and to your brand. And this is a in-person touch point. This is one of the few times you get to interact with your customer theoretically in person through your artwork and through your packaging. So make it a really great experience. I think it's one of the easiest ways to elevate how your work is perceived without doing too much extra work. So it's something you could really sit down, order some of this stuff, figure out your packaging in a couple of hours, and be good for a really long time. So packaging is really, just to round us out, about being intentional, not about spending a ton of money. I really recommend the Substack because I think that's something that I have a lot of resources that will be coming out on Thursday. And then I encourage you to DM or tag me or let me know your kind of packaging wins, things you found. If you found like a really interesting source or you're really proud of your packaging, send me a photo, the Art Kitchen Club, Haley Price White, either account. I'd absolutely love it. So I'm so excited. I hope you enjoyed this.